I think we should go ahead and get started, and whoever wants to join us later, they can join us.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is just a little bit about me, where my interest in cybersecurity comes from. So I've been on a lot of critical infrastructure related stuff that has to do with the utility, and that end of cybersecurity is very different than the personal end of it, right? I was also in charge of IT for a number of years at Millstone, and that's where a lot of the, the human firewall type stuff, where people get into trouble because they click on things they shouldn't click on and open things they shouldn't open and all that. So we'll go through all that. I think it'll be interesting, and we can, maybe when we wrap up, we can have some, some discussion about whatever you want, Facebook or anything of that nature. So just as background, so we'll all have the same terminology. Cyber has to do with computers and information technology. And so that's the point, is that it's so insidious, it's so common, it's embedded in every process that we do. So we take it for granted. We've gotten to that point. It's only in the order of, I don't know, what, 14 years or so, since, maybe a little less, since the first smartphone came out. It's only in like 2008, I think it was. And yet we can't live without it anymore. And I could tell you stories about when the power goes out, of what happens to people. They lose their minds because they're so connected now via technology that they don't have any other way to have a social network. So it's quite interesting how we've changed. If you go back, several decades, when the power would go out, nobody cared. I mean, so what? So the food might spoil, but you usually had ice to keep it cold in a cooler, and you could always pull out the barbecue and cook what you had. But now it's all about the technology. So the security aspect is staying safe. It's keeping people, places, things safe so they don't get hurt, they don't cause damage, they don't cause harm. And we can protect ourselves in a variety of ways. Hardware like a lock or a firewall, there's software that you can buy, antivirus software and so forth, and certainly law enforcement. But we don't want to get to that point. We want to learn how to protect ourselves. So the first thing to note is that whenever you have, you're implementing security measures, protocols, things that you do, there's a trade-off. There's always a trade-off. Anything that you do to protect yourself causes some form of inconvenience or dysfunction. So ultimate convenience is I can access anything and everything from anywhere, and I can control it. Life is great. Everything's interconnected. There's no filters, no passwords. Anyone can do anything. And it's open source, open storage. Great. That's probably what people envisioned when they first started doing this, connecting people together with the predecessors to the internet way back in the 60s and 70s. It didn't take long to realize that once this gets in the wrong hands, there's problems to be had. And so where we are right now is we have to limit ourselves to being able to access and control things based on what we need and what we want. And any time that we extend that, we also extend the risk that we're going to have security issues. So we have firewalls, we have anti-malware, antivirus software, and so forth. We have some filtering. Your email probably has a junk folder, whether it works well, it puts too much stuff in there or not enough stuff, it misses things. It takes things that you don't want put in there, and it confuses stuff. Complex and dynamic password rules, they're great, but it's a pain in the neck. You have to remember multiple passwords. They're not easily remembered, because if they're easily remembered, they're easily guessed. If you use your phone to control your bank account or your garage door opener, then you're going to run into issues with the security of those connections. Just want to, you guys want to mute yourselves, Dan?
Sorry.
And then ultimately, the ultimate security is what's called an air gap. So you only have local access and local control. You're only a step away from having no automation. There's almost no communications, highly restricted access, and not very convenient. And that's not something that it doesn't exist. Some time ago, I worked on some equipment that was used for nuclear weapons, long time ago in my career. And we made a machine that electroplated some parts at a facility run by Martin Marietta down in Tennessee. And they didn't allow any connection to it. So we made these machines for all over the world. And what we would do is when there was an issue, you dial in by modem back then, and you go into the back door of the device and you'd root around and find the problem and fix it or make adjustments and so forth. And they wouldn't allow that. So if you wanted anybody to do anything to their machine, you had to go to Tennessee and they would escort you in. It was highly protected facility, Department of Energy and all that. And so that's called an air gap. So basically where the plug went from the phone line into the device, there was nothing plugged into it. That wouldn't work nowadays for most people. And I can tell you that would certainly disable a lot of the networking that we do socially. So one of the things that people need to do is to, first off, when you get stuff in email, a text message, whatever, that you don't click it, you don't activate the link. If you need to look at what it is, you hover. You take the mouse cursor and you hold it over the link, and down in the bottom where it tells you where you're going to go, you need to study that a little bit if you're not sure where you're going. So it's going to show you a URL, the address on the web that it's going to take you, or it's going to show you that this is going to open a file and the file has an extension on it, a 3-letter extension like .doc or .docx, they're 4 letters sometimes. And that's a Word document. And so you say, well, do I want to open a Word document? Do I want to open a PDF? You might, and it might be from a trusted sender. And if that is the case, then you go ahead and do it. But it also might be a .exe. And a .exe is an executable file. And almost always is trouble when you get something like that in an email sent to you. Very rarely do people share programs that way with a link to a .exe. The exceptions would be when you're downloading software to your computer that you intend to do this and you went to a trusted site and maybe you even bought it. I don't know. So one way to look is to hover your mouse. I know a lot of people don't know that. Don't reply or unsubscribe to junk email. When you reply or you unsubscribe, it confirms that you exist. Most of the emails that go out where you get this junk mail in your folder, it's going to unknown addresses. They have a list that they're just computer generating millions of email addresses in all different forms. And you got one because it did for mine, it starts out with GOLDBEM. So they got GOLDBEM, but I'll bet they also send one to GOLDBEN and GOLDBEO alphabetically to every possible letter combination to get it. So you got one and you don't want to get it anymore. Just delete it. Because if you reply or you unsubscribe, they know that that's a good address. And now they can take it and sell it for more money than it was worth before, because it wasn't worth anything until you confirmed it. So then you'll start getting more stuff. Big problem, right? Phone calls, emails, text messages. If you're not sure of anything that you're getting and you're interested in it, you initiate the contact, and not to the addresses that they gave you in whatever mode they contacted you. Go to their website. So if you want to contact Microsoft and you get an email that says click here to contact Microsoft, it's probably crap. Unless you're having a conversation with someone at Microsoft, in all likelihood it's spoofed. They're making it look like it comes from Microsoft. You're going to get in trouble by clicking on it. So we're also going to talk about that type of thing, how to spot phishing scams, and what spoofing is. Spoofing is where they make you think that it's coming from somewhere that it's not. I apologize for the eye test here, but there's a lot of content. Phishing is just a cyber crime where they try to deceive somebody, you in some cases, to steal confidential information or something else of value. Could be an email, a text, a phone call, a letter. Sometimes they'll do it in person. You'll get people that come to your door ostensibly selling something or wanting to teach you something, or you may run into them at a show or whatever. You have to be careful all the time. So phishing victims are tricked into disclosing information that you shouldn't have given it up. And the only reason you're giving it is because you trust them. And they've tricked you to get you to trust them. That's typically how that works. So when they're phishing, they'll ask you for date of birth, social security number, and so forth. Social security number is probably the most sensitive, but any one piece of information isn't generally in and of itself valuable. They need to connect it to something else. You can't really do anything with 9 digits. And even if you say this is a social security number, because most people don't have access to a database that could look that up and see whose it is. So they're going to want your name and the social security number, or they're going to want your birth date and your name, or they're going to want your address and your phone number. You can make a list of the types of information that you can imagine they can connect. Once they connect it, they can go further with it. They can't do anything with one piece. They can do things with many pieces. And one of the things they'll do is once they have 2 pieces, they'll use that to go get other information out on the web about you, because there's a lot of information out there on most, if not all of us. If you try Googling yourself, if you remember, somebody asked John Kerry that, I think in the 2004 election, have you ever Googled yourself? And at that time, people giggled because they thought it sounded like something dirty. In fact, you should Google yourself once in a while and see what's out there about you. You might be surprised. So cyber criminals use that information to open accounts, to make purchases, to do all kinds of things in your name because that has value. And they do sell that information. Legitimate companies and agencies, they don't ask for sensitive information by mail. When they call you or they email you, they know your name. They know more than 2 things about you. They have domain emails. So if you get something from Costco, it should be from, at Costco.com, an email, or at Costco.com, the web address. It shouldn't be storesecurity.com or CostcoStoreSecurity.com. That's BS. They're making you think that it's going somewhere that hopefully you buy into it. They don't hide the hyperlink, the hyperlinks that take you to their website. One of the things you have to be careful when you get some of these emails is that the whole email could be a hyperlink. So you could click anywhere in that email thinking you're just trying to move the text around and so forth. And the whole thing could be a hyperlink. So you have to be very careful. Again, hover and see if it's doing anything down at the bottom of the page. You should never click on unsolicited attachments, never on an executable file, a screensaver file, SCR. They embed all kinds of malware in there. Malware is stuff that'll load into your computer and give you problems going forward. It doesn't just go away when you close the email or whatever. And zip files could be anything. So you need to be very careful with those as well. They don't provide links. They do provide links that match their legitimate URL. Again, hover. And they have absurd, the scammers will also often imply that there's absurd urgency with dire consequences. If you don't reply to this in the next 24 hours, we're going to delete your bank account, or we're going to turn off your access to your email, things of that nature. Real companies don't do things like that. Social engineering is a nice way to describe the things that scammers try to do to get you to trust them. They do often include a sense of urgency. And one of the reasons that they do that is to get you to hurry and not use good judgment and to make you feel like you're doing the right thing. And it also doesn't give you time to reach out to somebody and say, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? They rush you for a reason. Antivirus software is out there. It doesn't protect you from everything, but if you don't have any antivirus software on your computer and you connect to the internet like every computer, it may not take but a few minutes before they're in. There are programs that hackers use to explore, to ping your address and to ping random addresses. And from a commercial perspective, people used to ask, how long if your firewall went down? And I mean down like open, it allowed anything in and it wasn't protecting. How long after that happened would a company like Eversource, would it be before they got hacked? And I would tell people, I don't think it would take a minute. They're constantly pinging. Over the course of a day, there's millions of attempts to go in and see where things are. And they may discover stuff. They may discover that you changed out a server, or that you changed an IP address, or some other technical mumbo jumbo that goes on in the background at a company. But even though they can figure that out, they hopefully can't get any further because of the protections that are in place. AVG is a free one. It's a free antivirus program. It's the basic version. It's pretty decent. But others that you buy are you can buy AVG, an expanded version. You can buy McAfee, Norton. There's others. One of the ones that most domestic security experts don't recommend is Kaspersky. It's a pretty good program, but it's sourced from Russia, and there's a lot of illicit activity that comes from the former Soviet Union, China, North Korea, Iraq, some of the former Yugoslavia nations, Serbia and so forth. So if you buy antivirus software that comes from there, it just doesn't seem like a good idea. I hate to say it because Kaspersky is probably a very decent product, and that's what I've heard. But I could tell you that all the companies that I've been associated with, and none of them would use it. Passwords are a pain in the neck. We all know that. We write them down or we make them easy to remember. When you make them easy to remember, they're easy to guess. There's programs out there that hackers use that'll try different versions of your passwords, and you'd be amazed how many people have their password as password. It's the first thing that comes in the list of things that they try. I said the Boston Red Sox, any baseball team, football team, pet names, it's very common. So one of the things you need to do is create good, strong passwords. A lot of places will allow you to use the ones that you probably prefer because they are too easy to guess. So they have restrictions in place when you create the password. It has to be a certain number of letters, certain types of characters, and so forth, numbers, capitals, lowercase. They make you change them periodically. The one thing that you can do that adds to the security is using different passwords for different purposes. And the reason is, if you do get hacked, if your password does get discovered, you haven't lost everything. You've only got one place to go fix it, or maybe two, whatever. You can monitor whether your password's been exposed or hacked. Most banks provide that information free of charge now. A lot of places, when you go to log in, as you log in, it says, hey, your password was revealed in a database breach. It's generally not taken from you in those cases. It's taken from companies that you do business with. So if you set up a password at Macy's.com and Macy's gets hacked, which they probably have, almost all companies have been hacked at one time or another, then your password gets exposed and you should change it. That's one of the reasons they encourage you to change it frequently.
That's right.
It's a problem that seniors are targeted so frequently. Somebody's off mute.
I got confused.
I think Artie.
Artie, can you mute?
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So seniors are often less tech savvy, although my experience in recent years, that's not the case. My mother-in-law is 90, how old is she now? 96, I think. And it's amazing what she knows. So I don't say that, but it's often the case, but it's not always the case, right? Sometimes people are lonely and they'll take any conversation and engage in it. Sometimes they have impaired judgment. It could be for any number of reasons. When we get later in life, hopefully, we have some wealth because we're going to live off of that through our later years. So sometimes as we're older, we're naive about modern fraud. I'm involved in this stuff on a daily basis, and I still shake my head in awe sometimes of the lengths that criminals will go to engage people like us in some kind of a fraud. And it's incredibly clever. And as time goes on, it gets better and better. And also, as we get older, we're less likely to consult others because we have a lifetime of knowledge. We've been independent. We've been successful, and we probably figure we got it all in our heads, and we can figure this out for ourselves. Lots of scams out there. We've all heard about the grandparent scams where people get a phone call or an email, says your kids and your grandchild is in trouble and you need to wire money or whatever. There's Medicare scams. I get a junk mail folder full of this stuff almost every day. It's amazing how much of it is out there, and it's so common and so easy to recognize. And I think we're all in that boat that we have to wonder, why do they do it? And the reason they do it is it works. If they send out 3 million of these and 1/10 of 1% of the people fall for it, they had a pretty good day. Funeral details. When somebody dies, there's information in the paper of a confidential nature, and they can use that in a phone call or in a mail or in an email to convince you that they're someone that they're not, and to get you to do something that you know you shouldn't do. Fake charities, they all appear after a disaster. Oftentimes there's collections for hurricane victims or any number of other things that we see that happen. And it's not from somebody we know. It's not from the Red Cross, or maybe it looks like it's from the Red Cross. Whoever it is, they're getting more and more clever, and we need to be very careful of that. Anti-aging or other miracle medical products and services. I mean, I've got the picture here of the guy with the snake oil, and we know better, but yet the mailbox is full of offers for things that just common sense would tell you this isn't going to work. Internet scams where you can download free software. Wow, that's fraught with peril. Financial advice and mortgages. I never really thought to look in my junk mail folder for a good deal on a mortgage. It just seems like a bad idea. And hopefully you do too. And that's what we want people to do, is to be that human firewall and think that way. Sweetheart scams, where these go on all the time. We read about them, about somebody who starts corresponding with somebody that they strike up a relationship online, and we really don't know who they are, but we assume based on the conversation that it's legitimate, and we like having relationships. And the next thing you know, we're sending them money for a trip or for something that they need because they're a little short this month. There's also IRS and other official scams. We get stuff all the time, especially phone calls from ostensibly from the IRS. And you need to talk to the inspector because they're going to take away your house and your bank accounts and so forth. People believe it. Obviously, somebody's believing and buying into it. Life insurance scams all the time. They'll talk to you about your policy and see if they get you a better deal. They'll switch your policy. They'll get you to forfeit any accrued value in a whole life policy and switch you to a term life insurance policy, or maybe no life insurance policy at all. And then the do not call scams. This is new. Most of us have registered for the do not call registry. You can go online and do that, and it's a good thing. It isn't totally effective, obviously, because there are a lot of people that break the law and don't look at the list and not call the people that are on it. But the new thing is that they call you or they contact you and they say, you need to register again. We're revamping the database, or we have some corruption or whatever. Just go and put your information in again, and it'll make it look like you're going to that registry. And then they've got some personal information on you. If you've never gone to Snopes.com, I highly suggest it. It is a great website. You go there with anything that you hear that sounds fishy, and you put it in, and it'll tell you whether it's true or not. And they'll tell you what research was done to come up with the conclusion that they have. And sometimes they have no conclusion. Sometimes they'll say it's inconclusive. And it could be anything about, is somebody dead or alive? There's another site for that also, but it can be about anything that you read online, in the newspaper, whatever. A lot of times stuff won't get debunked for a while. And if you get it while it's still alive, people are very convinced that this is real, that you can go here and you can get 50% off everything at Walmart today using this link, whatever. Go check it out. Develop a questioning attitude. It's really not rude to fact check, despite what goes on in politics and so forth. On our basis, it's a matter of survival. And Snopes is a fun place to spend a little time to read about different things that they've researched. It's quite interesting. So it's not just fact checking, but they show their research and they show how they evaluate each item in what is a very vast database. They've been around for a long time. Great website. I thought you'd appreciate that. That's been around for a while, but it's not atypical of other stuff that's out there. Email spoofing. You get an email and you don't know who it's from, or you do know who it's from because they say who they are, and then you read it and it's got spelling errors and incorrect domain names in the sender's email address. Those are indications of a spoofed email. Unfortunately, they're getting better, and they don't always have syntax errors and spelling errors and so forth that would kind of raise a flag when you're looking at it. So it usually tells you that quickly. It usually asks you to transfer money or provide confidential information. It has embedded links with URLs you don't recognize. Again, hover the mouse. Can't emphasize that enough. Spelling errors, poor grammar, unfamiliar language. There's certain words that they use because they're foreign, because they're really not domestic, and they're trying to sound domestic, and they kind of bungle it. In the old days, it was pidgin English that you get in Chinese products that had user manuals that were written by someone who doesn't speak English, and they wouldn't make any sense. They have words out of place and so forth. They're not that bad anymore. It's not hard for them to spoof a website. I saw a demonstration by the FBI a couple of years ago. They went on the dark web, and in front of everybody, they did this live on a screen. They went on the dark web. They found a website that sold software that would copy a website and alter the URL just a little bit. And they sent it out to everybody in the room. And people in the room were asked to go ahead and click on it and go ahead and put your information in. And we watched on the screen as everybody's phone number, address, name, and so forth came in, all organized, like very professionally. And when you went to the website, the one that they spoofed was a Bank of America website. It was almost impossible to tell that it wasn't the right website. They had altered the URL in such a way that it was very convincing, very frightening. They did that in about 15 minutes, and it cost, I think, $49. They went out and bought that software. So if you want to get into the business of spoofing and collecting money illicitly, it's not hard to do. A lot of websites autofill your name and password. You may have that on your computer at home. You have to be careful so that the password manager that you have or the autofill that you have doesn't get tricked as well, because there are ways that it can get tricked. So you want to make sure that when you go to a website and you fill this stuff in automatically, that it's really going to where you want it to go. Again, hover. Website addresses contain the name of the spoofed domain, but they're not the official domain. When you see that, run like hell. Delete it, get away from it. Caller ID. It's pretty useless now to some extent. When I get a call from L&M Hospital, I always used to answer it because it would be a doctor or an appointment thing or the billing office or whatever. And lately I've been getting calls that say they're from L&M Hospital, and I pick it up and it's not L&M Hospital. You have that big delay before someone comes on the line, and the things that they're talking about don't have anything to do with what I would have expected. It's very important that you don't engage the caller in conversation. A lot of times we think, well, let's waste their time. Let's have a conversation with them. A lot of times you get that dead air, and then someone comes on the phone. The first thing that they say is, hi, can you hear me? Or hi, this is Jessica at such and such. Can you hear me? They record your answer, and they use that when to call in and get voice recognition on some bank sites and so forth. Things where you might do business with a Citizens Bank, for example, and someone there recognizes you. And when you call, they have those automated systems, and you say yes in your voice. And then when you get on the line, it sounds like you, and it opens up a door for them. They record that. Don't engage in conversation if you don't know who they are. It's not a good thing. pretty much nothing good can come of it. Up on the address line on your browser, up on the left on top, where it shows what website you're at, there should be a padlock if it's a secure website. Now, they don't all have it, but if there's a need to have it, it should be there. So if you're doing a transaction, that little padlock should be there. It means that there's a valid security certificate on file for that website, and it passes muster with the security software that's built into your browser. It's very basic, but you should look for it. And if you think you're getting spoofed, look for that too. It won't be there if it's not a legitimate site. Obviously, there's a lot to know. I mean, this presentation can go on for hours. I kind of chose to do it with a brief overview of everything because I don't know what level everybody's at, but it'd be nice to have some conversation in a moment that we can maybe expand on this. So basically, we always used to say, be a human firewall. You're the first line of defense between them and us. Be alert, skeptical, leery, apprehensive, whatever word you want to pull out of the thesaurus. Don't give out personal information unless you're in a familiar setting. A website, an email, not a familiar setting. The bank where you do business, where you're standing at the teller, or you're on the phone with someone you called and you know, those are familiar settings. Don't answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. If it's somebody who's legitimate, they're going to leave a message and you can call them right back. But if you don't recognize them and you answer it, you're opening yourself up to some problems. And listen for dead air when you get that phone call. If you get dead air, hang up. Dead air means that they're waiting for someone to be available in a call center to take your call. And the delay could also imply that they're overseas and not here. Don't talk unless you know who it is. If they say, "Can you hear me okay?" Don't say anything. Consult with your family, with experts, others in the know, people who can hopefully can help you or maybe been through the same thing. If you or someone you know gets scammed, you shouldn't be ashamed. It's very, very common. And don't be angry with the victim. It happens to really smart people, but do report it. www.ic3.gov is basically a repository for all of that sort of content, and they want to hear from you. If you don't think it's important, it may be to them, and if they get it and it's not important, it's okay. This is all they do all day. I'm guessing that they have operators who are not very busy because a lot of people won't call in when something happens. They're going to ask you for information. It's a legitimate site. The names of the scammers or the organization, whatever you can get after something's happened, you realize it. Make notes so that you don't lose it and give that information to them. Discontinue your contact if you think they're a scammer. Don't think that you're gonna outsmart them and maybe goad them into giving up information that you can use to get them. It doesn't happen. This is what they do for a living. And then place a fraud alert with your credit agencies and close whatever bank and credit card accounts they open during the scam period. So you need to put an end to it and then try to recover afterwards. But again, it happens to really smart people, and there's no shame in it. It's unfortunate, of course, but it shouldn't be the cause of that kind of distress. And I think we're at the end of my slide deck. So let me stop my share. Maybe you can open microphones, and does anybody have comments or questions? Yeah,
I have questions. So not answering the phone if you don't recognize who's calling applies to both the home phone and the cell.
Yeah, now it does. I would say till 2 years ago, about 2 years ago is when the bad calls started coming in on the cell phones.
And how can we tell if we have virus protection on a cell phone? Like, I don't remember ever buying that.
You probably don't. There is some built into the software. Even though they're vulnerable to viruses, they're less vulnerable than a computer, but they're still vulnerable. And the more sophisticated they get with apps, the more likely they are to get infected. There is virus software for cell phones, but honestly, it depends how you use your cell phone. If you're using it for a lot of apps, a lot of computing, you might want to get it. But most cases, most people like me anyway, I don't use it that extensively.
So I shouldn't be paying my bills on my phone.
You can.
Like I mean, is it okay to pay no, I have online banking.
Yeah.
And I have an app for it and I get a bill and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
and I'm done. Is that okay?
Yeah, those are secure. And you went and got it and you pulled it in from a
Right.
legitimate site, hopefully from the Apple library or from the Google library, wherever you
Right.
got it from. Not in an email that somebody said, here, we are your bank and here's a link to this. You could call the
Right.
bank and ask them if it's legitimate.
No,
But in most cases, I'd be suspect.
it's been great. I was just worried about it potentially getting hacked, I guess.
No.
And then my last question, and I'll let other people talk. When I get an email that's junk, it's okay to mark it as spam and block the sender?
Yeah, you can. The only problem, okay, so on email, you can block senders all you want because they're not spoofing. They can't have the same email address as you. But on caller ID, when you get a call and it says it's from
Say, can you hear
L&M Hospital, and you say, oh, I'm going to block it because I know it's spam. Well, you actually blocked L&M Hospital. They made it look like it, and that's who you blocked.
Right.
So they roll through a lot of different numbers for that reason. And as you're going along, you're blocking numbers that might be legitimate. But for email, all that's really doing is changing the way that it's sorted in your on your email program. So it's going to put stuff in the junk folder when you say to block it, and if it's not junk and you mark it as such, it's going to put it in your inbox. That's basically all you're really doing.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Artie, you're muted. There you go.
Fuck. I couldn't find the link because I thought somebody spammed me and I didn't have it.
No problem. Glad you made it.
I've been the victim of a couple of good scams. The first one might have been 5 or 6 years ago when I went to file my income tax, and I was told by the government that I couldn't file because somebody had already filed, because I had filed. And that was interesting because I was owed like $7,000 refund, and somebody collected it, filed a tax return in my name, somehow got the return. So I had to fill it out in, I mean, they made restitution. I eventually filled it out, sent it into the government. But then ever since then, I have like a special code to verify that it's me, that I have to use every day. So that was one. And then just like a couple of weeks ago, I got two credit cards, one in my name and one in someone else's name, as if they were my partner.
Oh boy.
Made Barbara very suspicious.
Good.
She didn't trust me so much, she would have been really suspicious.
Yeah.
It had a different person's name that I didn't recognize. And I said, what sense does this make? And we called the credit union. They said it's bogus and that it doesn't matter if they sent you the cards. They can open the account and try to use it by phone. As long as it's open, they've applied for it. And even though they're not going to use the cards, they just use it over the phone.
Yeah.
It's
everything's online. No one goes to the store anymore, right? Yeah. That's frightening. Yeah. Yeah. That's identity theft, really. That's it.
Yes.
Yeah. Misha, how you doing?
Ed, hi everybody. On antivirus, I recently stopped using any of Norton and stuff. I use Microsoft Defender, which came with Windows 10. What do you say about it?
You like? I've never used it, so I don't know. It's probably a good product.
That's what my IT people recommended, and that's what we do at work. And I started to do that as soon as Windows 10 came around. That's what I use. But to do that, you need to deactivate, remove all McAfee if you have it there. This computer comes usually with McAfee or Norton or whatever. But then activate the Defender, and it works. So far, I was lucky, knock on wood.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very good. Absolutely.
Okay.
There's probably others too. AVG is a small company, but it's free. And the Microsoft one comes with your Windows. So
Yeah.
it's nice.
All right.
Eventually, if they get enough people to use it, then they'll charge for it.
Well, so far, no.
It's the Microsoft way.
Well, they charge enough for Windows, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mark.
thank you.
Sure,
Thank you.
no
Thank you
problem.
for your talk.
My pleasure.
Hi, Ed, it's Nadine Lippman.
Hi, Nadine.
Question or two questions. Well, first of all, in response to what Judy said, a lot of the Android phones come with a product called Knox, from what I understand, which is an antivirus thing built into the phones. Because I use AVG, and when I brought my phone in, they asked me why I had it on there, because they said it was duplicate and was using up extra memory. So they said it does have a built-in one.
Okay.
But my question is, how secure are the internet companies that we all sign up with? Every so often I'll see a message that, my service, well, I just switched to Xfinity from Atlantic, but I would see a thing that said, you're using, your connection may not be secure, even though I do have AVG and I do use Windows Defender at the same time.
So the answer is they're probably doing what would be considered best practices, but no matter what they do, there's always a limit. I'm not aware of issues with the major carriers. Everybody's going to get hacked sooner or later. It's just almost inevitable because there's not just outsider threats, there's insider threats. You get some disgruntled employee and they have the keys to the kingdom, and that's where it goes. The question is how well they protect against it and how well they respond. And I think the larger companies are probably pretty good at responding. If you haven't heard from them directly that there's a problem, there's probably not a problem. There's all kinds of reporting requirements on these things. As soon as you find out that you've been hacked or whatever, you have to pass it along. The other piece is you're using them for communications, and the communication channel itself, they're generally, it's pretty good security. That's actually a technical term. Pretty good security is probably where they are with most of it, and it's probably good enough for the rest of us. It's not like a military connection or some kind of a secure line that you would find Department of Energy or among the military, but doesn't need to be. I think you're okay. When you pay attention to the communications that you get from these carriers, but generally speaking, I haven't seen any problem with most of them. Hey, Dan.
Thank you, Ed. Again, another interesting presentation for sure. A question for you and then a question for Misha. Just to be sure I understand what you mean by hover, because it's so essential. Do you mean, in other words, if I put my cursor without opening the email over the name, it'll also then show lowercase, smaller, it'll show the domain, it'll show the supposed address. Is that what you mean by hovering, or what exactly do you mean?
That's it. So if you see a link, or even if you don't see a link, but when the cursor is over whatever is tied to the link, you should see something in the address line down below that shows you where it's going to take you. And the reason I say, we know what links look like, right? It's, it looks like a URL, an internet address. Sometimes it has an underline, sometimes it's blue, and then once you click on it, it turns yellow or green or whatever. Excuse me. But sometimes they'll have a picture of an email, and the whole email is the link. And anywhere you put the cursor, it's going to do it. And that's kind of disconcerting. It throws you off because, well, it's not changing as I move it around, so I must not be on it. And in fact, you are on it. The whole thing is it. It's one of the tricks that you use. But yes,
Okay.
when you hover it, it'll show up in that line, just as you described.
So what I meant by that is, so first there is supposedly the name of the sending person or organization, and then there's some text. I hover over the name of the supposed sending organization, and it gives me an address, right? Is that what I'm supposed to hover over and look for? Or do you mean hover over the information to the right of it?
The answer is yes, both. So two things that you want to look at. You don't know who, you say, it came from Dan, and I look at, and it says Dan's name there, and I hover over it. When I hover over it, the sender isn't Dan at all. It's somebody else. It'll show you where it actually came from. So that's one good thing to look at. The other thing to look at is links that are in the email or on the web page, for that matter. When you hover your mouse over the link, you'll see where it's going to take you if you click it.
Okay, but it's you won't see a link. I mean, if you don't open the email, will you still see a link in the line to the right of the supposed sending name?
Probably not. It depends on if you have the preview pane open and how big you make it. So sometimes you can set it so it only shows like the first sentence of the email, and but sometimes you can set it so it shows, you know, half the email.
I didn't realize that.
You can drag, you can make it bigger or smaller. Yeah.
Oh, and how do you do that? Is that in some settings or something? So
in Outlook, you actually you can specify. I think you just drag it to open up more of the preview pane. It may be a setting, but it's a preview pane. You can also turn the preview pane off, so that you only see a list of emails that you got, but there's not, all you see is the subject line. There's nothing in the subject line.
Okay. So basically what this sounds like to me is, if I'm unsure, just don't open it and erase it. And if it's really crucial, they'll get back to me one way or another.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, whoever they is, you could always reach out to them directly and say, did you send me something? You know, like if you sent me an email right now and it had a PowerPoint attachment, I would write back to you and say, say a PowerPoint attachment or a PDF, whatever. You put an attachment in it. I'd write back to you and say, Dan, did you send me an attachment that you want me to open? Because I know I'm writing back to you because I know your address. And if you said yes, then I might open it. But I probably won't if I don't hear back from you, or if you say, no, I didn't send you anything. Yeah.
Okay. And Misha, my question for you is, why does your IT company say don't use Norton? I've used them for some stuff, and I've been very happy. I got to speak with a human being who spent one time like 2 hours with me unscrambling something. So why does your IT company veer away from Norton?
They're not veer away from Norton, but when I read myself millions, literally, of different reviews and articles about this thing. And then I spoke to our IT people. And when Windows 10 came about, Windows 10, it's first time when antivirus and security was built into the software. Microsoft built it, and they stay behind it. They don't want to get to the people say, oh, see, Microsoft put this Microsoft Windows Defender into this thing, and they get hacked. Microsoft don't want that. So their protection of this program is very, very powerful. It's very good. So that's what I start to do as soon as Windows 10 came. I started to use Windows 10, and this is it. So far, I was lucky myself.
It's included. That's the biggest thing.
It's included. It's part of. You just have to activate it because it's not on by default.
So it's like the AVG's free version, except it's Microsoft, which is a pretty big entity. Dan, to your point, you know, I subscribe to McAfee. I used to do Norton, you know, Symantec. They're all good.
They're all good, yeah.
I would be surprised if you could call Microsoft and talk to somebody the way you can with the other services. But sometimes you call and you didn't pay anything to begin with, and they may charge you, you know, like when you call, you say, well, it's going to be $50 for us to talk to you, you know, that type of thing. I've seen that with some companies.
Well,
Okay.
I say that if you have to call them for this, about this thing, you're in trouble already.
Yeah.
So that means it doesn't work. So
Absolutely.
it's like, you know, the best dentist is the one you don't have to call to, or the best plumber. So as far as this thing goes, so I just like what was been like 3-4 years maybe. All my computers at home and mine and Liana and my business computer all have activated Windows Defender. Just make sure it's up to date, of course, and works so far. Been lucky.
Okay. Another basic question. How does one get, I'm guessing I have Windows 7. How does one get Windows 10? Do they have hard disks or must you download it from Microsoft?
Well, I think we should take it offline then, but I urge you, it's like a really urgent issue to update from Windows 7 because you are wide open to all kind of trouble.
Okay.
I don't want to scare you, but that's the case.
No. That's fine. That's fine. I will call you later, Misha.
Okay.
So Windows 7 is no longer supported for
Right.
security updates. So as new threats come along, it's not added to the mix that they have. So that's the problem. The other end of it is usually, and this is the way it's always been with Microsoft, when they come out with a new operating system, you need a new computer because if you've got Windows 7 and it was installed on the computer, it's already several years old. And I'm with you. I don't like to throw away working technology, and it's the only thing in my life I think where I don't run it into the ground because you can't. It'll eventually stop working and cause you problems. But that's it. So if you take your computer and you say I'm going to upgrade to Windows 10 or 11, if your computer isn't up to the challenge, you'll find that you're protected, but you can't use it anymore because it's so slow. Yeah, Artie.
The issue of keeping up to date operating systems that are supported actually goes, it's even a legal question. You know, I'm a dentist and now I work with another group so I don't have to worry about it. I'm not my own office anymore. But towards the end of my career, I had Windows 7 machines. They worked great. Everything was perfect. And then people came in and said, well, you know what? This all needs to be updated. Your Windows 7s, it's not going to be it's not going to be protected anymore. And you could expose your thousands of patients' information and you could be liable for breach. Meanwhile, you know, Blue Cross loses 3 million social security numbers. I don't see anybody going to jail, but the IT people, you know, are telling you the truth, but they're scaring the bejesus out of every small person. So you wind up buying all new software, all new computers. And I think maybe it's good, but maybe it's also helps drive the economy because we're every 5, 6, 7 years, we're all updating all our hardware and all our software. And it seems a little disingenuous that they couldn't keep that going, but there's no advantage for them to keep that supported. So it's very easy for them to say, sorry, it's not supported. Go buy $40,000 worth of new equipment.
It's not that we resent them doing it. It's that we regret that we didn't think of it first. Because it's pretty good work if you can get it.
Ed, what would happen if the whole world said, this digital thing is not going as well as we thought it would be? And are we so deeply into the digital age that you can't go back? Nothing, you can't revert?
Yes, I really believe that we are. So I've done a lot of work on electromagnetic pulse and recovering from that. That's the effect that you get from a nuclear weapon that explodes at a high altitude. You get it from all of them, but in particular, that's how North Korea would cut us down at the knees. is you explode one of these things at a high altitude and it wipes out all your electronics. So all of a sudden your car doesn't run anymore because it's loaded with computers and you can't communicate and the phones go dead and all your electronics stops working. The power goes out. And it's a very real thing. And it's a distinct possibility, but it's if there was that type of a war or that type of, it also could be a terrorist incident as well. It's very frightening. It would set society back decades. It would be very bad. Sometimes you hear theories about how it would decimate the population because eventually you'd have food, transportation issues and supply chain issues and food shortages and so forth. You get a little taste for what's going on now with the pandemic. I see China's rationing food. They're because they're afraid they're going to be short on food. It's very scary. So it's a possibility, but I don't think it can go back. I could tell you when the power goes out for 3 days, 10 or 15 years ago, it was like, okay, 3 days, no big deal. After 3 days, people start to get antsy. Now, 3 hours and people don't know what to do with themselves because you cut them off from their network. It's embedded in every process. There's technology everywhere. We don't sometimes take note of it, but it's there.
I think you're right, Ed. And there's a novel that Artie and I read that talks about the EMP, which is the electromagnetic pulse, which got me thinking about it. And then I read Ted Koppel's book, Lights Out.
Yeah, I read that.
But the novel is called 1 Second After. Yeah, and it is at the least. You read that?
I didn't read it, but I've seen excerpts. I was on a committee that was based out of DC with the Edison Electric Institute, and we actually published a book. I think we talked about this once before, Dan. The Powering Through. It's all about the EMP and what would happen to society and what can be done to protect ourselves from it.
Yeah.
Well, like you were saying, when if power went out for 3 days, how would people deal with it? If Facebook goes offline for 3 hours, I mean, I haven't used Facebook in about a year, but like it makes the national news. Everybody is like freaking out. Teenagers can't talk to the other teenagers. It is like a big thing. It is big. It is really a big issue. So we are addicted. We are addicted to these things.
Yes, absolutely. Very good. Other questions?
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Night.